Hey everybody, Sheree Burton here. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness, and this is a podcast for women and men who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. I'm so grateful that I got through last week's episode in one piece. It was my most listened to episode of all time about my ayahuasca journey. So if you've not yet listened to that, maybe go check it out. I went definitely out of the box with that one. I felt like I needed to share some of my quiet musings, both through my transformative experience in Costa Rica, but also in the year and a half leading up to making the decision to go and all of the research behind that. So yeah, just as a postscript to that, since I aired that episode, I've had a lot of people come forward, very interested in learning more. So yeah, like I say, it's kind of the new frontier in trauma release, I believe, but it's not for everyone. So as I start to open up more of these kinds of discussions of ways that we can use gifts of the earth to heal our minds and bodies and our hearts, I will definitely be more forthcoming in sharing that. So, okay, today we have Nithya Shanti. He is a soul brother of mine. He has helped me through so much in my life. He has come through as a teacher, just with his general teachings, and also we've had a lot of opportunities to connect and talk, and he's just been so generous in bringing me into a space of looking at life through the lens of love and joy, I would say. And I feel like that's his gift, is just being in a space of joy. He just exudes that. And he is an internationally acclaimed teacher of what he calls joyful and conscious living. He actually has an MBA degree, and he worked in the corporate world for some time, and then he kind of left it all behind to live as a forest meditation monk for 6 years when he was in his 20s. And then he came out of that and decided that it was time to bring his deep learning into the world. So he is now this wonderful teacher. He does retreats. That's actually how I met him, I guess 7 or 8 years ago. And now he just shares with audiences worldwide. You can find him actually on Instagram at Nithya Shanti. But I love his catchphrase, like no matter how good, bad, or ugly what you're going through is, and not, for him to be insensitive or whatever, but he says, how wonderful. So it never strikes me as insensitive, that it always gives me pause to think how this is wonderful, whatever it is that I happen to be experiencing in my life, and how it's bringing me into greater soul learning and soul expansion. So today, now I have to back up a little bit, actually. We were slated to do our interview a couple days after I got back from Costa Rica, and I was so still integrating and not fully in my body and just trying to process. And so I WhatsApped him and I'm like, hey, I just cannot do this tonight. I'm just still not here. And so he was generous enough to say, let's talk anyway. So he really helped me reframe some of my experiences and got me to go into inquiry, which, is the practice of questioning. And so I asked, for him to kind of expound on that for this episode, because there is so much power in opening yourself to not having to know everything and just being in the quote unquote mystery, being in the mystery. So he has a lot of truth bombs he's going to share in this episode. We went pretty deep. You might want to grab a notebook and take some notes, because there are some phrasings that will appear that you've maybe not heard couched in quite those terms. And you may want to just journal it later or just come back to it. But our intention coming in, and we actually had a meditation together before we even started recording, but our intention was that this could be an episode that could be revisited multiple times for many layers of meaning. So get ready for the depth of this episode. And just, he lives in India, so his morning was my evening, and we just made this work. So I hope you love it. Nithya, Wow. This is such a beautiful synchronous time for us to connect.
Lovely to be here, Sherry.
Well, you and I talked a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, right when I returned from with me in Costa Rica. And you and I were supposed to do an interview that evening after I got back, but I messaged you and I'm like, I just don't have it in me. I'm still integrating. And you were just so generous to say, let's talk anyway. And you really were integral in helping me to process what was almost unnameable to me. It was just floating and I was in the ethers of it still. And I think I still am a little bit, but it was just really, really grounding to get your perspective. So I just honor you for that. Thank you.
Yes, I really felt privileged to talk to you at that time.
So here we are revisiting. And one of the things that I know that you're about lately, which I think is one of the reasons we reconnected, because we've known each other for lots of years, how you landed in Utah, I have no idea. You were just this angel that appeared, and it's been a blessing for me. I know my mom is the one that introduced me to your workshop and to your works, but since that time, you've kind of popped in and out as a teacher for me. I know I've reached out at different times, like, I just need the Eastern perspective here. I just need something deeper. And when I was going through my dark night and then, having my little girl in foster care, my baby in foster care that I was trying to adopt, et cetera, you were just such a grounding force. And so now I feel like, where I'm at with my journey into consciousness and oneness and understanding that it's less conceptual for me now and more of my lived experience. And I owe a lot of that to you. So I just, again, want to just offer my gratitude there.
Beautiful. Thank you.
But one of the reasons that I've reconnected with you is about this whole idea of, your latest project, which is kind of this building conscious community. And I want you to speak to your vision for that. I have my own vision, and I think we're pretty aligned in it, but you put words to it differently than I do. So I just think it's the wave of the future when we're going into this new era of the earth to be more, have more gatherings of peace, unity, inclusion, less marginalization, less stratification, less hierarchy, that sort of thing. So when you talk about building conscious community, what is that for you? What is your vision for that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I feel like before I get into that, to also just acknowledge everyone who's listening and wherever they are, and I want to include you, even in a subtle, energetic way, into this conversation. So it informs our conversation. And wherever each one of you is, and whenever you listen to this, because at least in my practice, I found time and space to be far more flexible than we imagine. And just inviting each one of you to be part of this in your own way, and to see, I don't think it's an accident that you're listening to this, and for this to support you towards greater clarity and towards greater alignment in your own process. And that's my intention. Right. Beautiful. Now. And this thing about community, I remember going to a puppetry class. It was the puppetry and acting class when I was just in school. It was maybe middle school somewhere, and we'd gone. My mother had put me in a little theater group. And there was an exercise where they asked us, tell us about something you'd like to have when you grow up. So everybody said something. Somebody wanted a big house. Somebody wanted, some fancy car. And I remember saying, I want to have friends all over the world. And people are kind of taken aback because that answer was quite different from what most other people had said. And I almost felt slightly embarrassed, but I had said something wrong. But I remember saying that. And in a way, and I'm sure, Sherry, you've had some experiences like this, and I'm sure many of the listeners have had. Did you sometimes innocently say things when you were quite young? And then in a strange way, your life tends to actually echo that and actually become that.
No, I used to get my dolls out and line them up and teach them, like my dolls and stuffed animals.
There you go. Right.
I needed a captive audience.
I remember pretending to be a sage. I would pretend to be meditating in the mountains. And my friends would say, "What are you doing?" I said, "No, this is me doing my thing." So, and I remember um, somebody asking me, this was really quite young, 5 years old, "What will you do when you grow up?" And I said, "I'll be a sannyasi." Sannyasi in India, the word sannyasi means someone who has renounced the normal worldly values and has chosen the ultimate truth as their only value.
Wow, at 5 years old?
At 5 years old, I said that I want to be a sannyasi, that I want to figure out what the highest truth is. Like, so strange. Where did that even come from?
Yeah. Your soul.
So, yeah, it's probably true. And so a lot of people have told me this, people who've looked at my so-called charts and horoscopes and things. I don't really get into that, but people have on their own volunteered. And they've told me similar thing, that, I've been a kind of a warrior in many lifetimes. And this lifetime is about shifting from this individual journeying, whether it's a spiritual journeying or any other kind of journeying, to awakening the collective.
Wow.
This lifetime is about collaboration. And that's hard for me because I like to be a lone wolf doing my own thing. That comes very easy to me. And the sense of, it's a challenge for me. That's my edge. My edge is getting into groups, and there's tremendous power there and potential there. But I also know there's a collective shadow there, and there is it's going to challenge me in ways that my individual practice cannot challenge me. And so I have to say I have this push and pull. So it's been difficult for me to take the step I've taken recently of just putting it out there and saying, hey, let's create conscious community. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to happen. All I can share is my dream. And like Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. But we all have this dream. And one of my favorite comedians is an American man. His comic name is Swami Beyond Ananda. Ananda means bliss. It's Swami Beyond Ananda. And he says something very powerful. He says, all we need for world transformation is television. People say, what are you talking about? Television is part of the problem. It keeps misinforming us. We don't even watch television. He says, no, the television means I tell you my vision and you tell me your vision. And so very briefly, I was very clearly, I would say, for my time as a monk, I was a Buddhist monk for several years. And I was living in a remote forest monastery, like the kind of stuff that people joke about, living on a mountain in a monastery in a forest.
Which I have to say, that's just so epically cool to have that as your background.
So I actually lived like that for about 6 years.
I think in my other lifetimes, I needed to be a contemplative, totally isolated. Anyway, but
you must have done it for you to do what you're doing now, for you to have integrated so many strands of experience so seamlessly. So in my case,
but I long for that. I long for that. I long for that time.
Yeah. Because there's a memory of it at some level. And so in my case, this, I would call it a download, that I was meditating pretty intensively, and there was a kind of a download. And it's like one of those moments where you get a very clear blueprint in a very short period of time. You get a very comprehensive and clear blueprint about what you're meant to do in this lifetime. And it occurred to me that I'm here to create not just another spiritual institution, which is focused on one teacher, one teaching, one philosophy, and not just another generic like university, which is focused on many, many topics, but focused outwards on usually doing so-called well in the world, getting a good career, getting a good job. Universities tend to be focused outwards, and they're quite diverse. Spiritual institutions tend to be focused inwards, but they tend to be quite monolithic and quite caught up in one idea, one philosophy, one teaching. And what came to me is I'm here to find a middle path. I'm here to create, not so much create, uncover rather, it's already there, to uncover the possibility that we can explore our inner being in a multidimensional, multifaceted way with far more open-mindedness, with far less fear, and really to bring fun and play and joy and love at the forefront. And to do it in this really, just like you go to the fair, in the US, you have these fairgrounds and you go, there's so many different fun activities available. You can have something fun to eat. You can play a game. You can go on the merry-go-round. And
like a festival,
that element,
kind of.
Like a festival, right? So that element, can we bring that level of playfulness and experimentation and willingness? Because what my practice taught me is every time I allow myself to be deeply impacted by the person in front of me or life as it presents itself, every time I do that, because when I allow myself to be impacted, it's a risk. I'm risking getting changed in some way. And I take that risk, and I'm even willing to be destroyed in that connection. To the extent I'm willing to allow myself to be destroyed by the impact, in that moment, I discover I'm invincible again and again and again.
It kind of reminds me of that quote by, I think it's C.S. Lewis. He's like, you are never, what did he say? You've never met a mere mortal. You are always in the company of gods and goddesses. So and, it's true. I think when you get into these rigid systems and programs where, like you said, it's monolithic, there's just this prevailing ideology. Maybe it's traditional, maybe some of it's based in truth, and maybe some of it's just based in tradition, but you lose so much of the beauty of individuality and really seeing people for who they are, not what they believe or what they're doing, just who they are.
It's the way I see it. Every single thing is there for a reason. You cannot appreciate freedom unless you've been in prison.
It's true.
So we need to, this is, I think God has a great sense of humor, and God plays a God trick on himself, herself, itself. The most basic God trick is to forget that he, she, it is God. And these are all the different ways. Like God says, let me see if I'm powerful enough to confuse myself, if I'm powerful enough to forget. And that's like the ultimate thing that God can do, to choose to forget. And then but also to be kind enough to leave clues along the way, right? So it's like it's like the nice word, Gordian knot. Gordian knot is a knot that just can't be opened. This knot cannot be resolved. And each one of us, I see, our body and mind like a Gordian knot. We've come with all kinds of patterning, physical patterning, of course, genetic patterning. And then we had this conditioning coming from our ancestors and coming from the culture that we are in. It's a Gordian knot. How do you untie this knot? So what you realize is you cannot resolve this knot. You can only dissolve this knot. So it's not by picking it apart. It's by literally questioning some really fundamental things about what's happening here in the first place. So like one of my teachers, very, very radical statement, he said, the waker's problems are not mine. Like the waking, just like in the dream state, it's like, okay, it's a dream. So it's a dream. Let the dream do the dream thing. So he would go one step further and say the waker's problems are not mine. He's literally dissolving the whole thing. He's like, what got me here will take me home. I'm not going to get entangled in this. It's a whole other way of approaching it. That's just an example.
Yeah, like it reminds me of, non-attachment. And also like when you're talking about sitting in a space where you get triggered, let's just say, maybe it's an unconscious community, or not. I mean, that sounds like so judgmental, but you get into certain gatherings where you can tell that ego is just running rampant, right? And so you get triggered and you're like, I'm not feeling fed here. I'm not. And so finding the beauty, because you can't meet it with more resistance, because it's only, like you said, it's not going to resolve that way. The dissolution of that maybe is just sending more love there. And then where I get a little bit like, okay, boundaries is, you don't have to drink the poison. You can go. So it's tricky. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like how long do you sit in that space and continue to get triggered and triggered and triggered before you either remove yourself or speak up?
See, as long as you assume you're the decision maker, this will always remain a problem. But first of all, did you decide to be born here? Did you like some very fundamental things? Am I deciding what my thought will be 2 minutes from now? I assume I am, but am I really? So to me, the way I work with these sort of situations in life, and they will come up, is again and again to open myself up to a larger dimension of intelligence. And I say, hey, like for example, right now my body's got anywhere between 20 to 200 trillion cells. Scientists can't figure out. So let's say 200 trillion cells. 200 trillion cells, I'm not even aware of one of them. I don't even know how one of them is functioning. Right? And then my brain, psychologists keep finding more and more and more, ways in which the brain mechanisms work. Our brain is supposed to be the most complex thing we found in the entire universe.
And then you go into
How
your
is this
energy
happening?
field, which is like
There you
atoms
go.
and quarks.
Even more.
Yeah.
There you go. Right. So right here, this is complete mystery. And to assume for a second that, oh, I know, I'm the driver of this marvelous supercomputer, this is a big assumption. So I like to actually question that assumption. When people ask me about, the spiritual journey, my guideline, or not guideline, would be like an offering to them would be, step out sometime in the night, find a patch of open sky, look up into the heavens, put your hands out, and just say 2 words. Use me. And I believe that's a transmission. In that moment, when you look at the sky and you open up and you say, use me, then it's an activation that happens. And from that moment onwards, your life will be lived by a bigger life, a larger life. It doesn't mean your personality goes away. You'll still have your quirks and personality things, but there's a much deeper current that starts guiding your life in ways that can't always be understood. And things happen, in my experience, they happen far more gracefully. Like, just a very simple example, in my tradition, we have you could call common knowledge, that the length of time you've been a monk, let's say you've been a monk for 10 years, it takes you at least half that time to reintegrate into normal society. Because monk life is so different, you see. So if you've been a monk for 10 years, it'll take you minimum 5 years to reintegrate into normal society. The same thing happens with people in the army or the armed forces.
Well, I have to tell you, as a church missionary, that happened to me. Serving church mission, yeah.
Same thing. So in my case, I was a monk for 6 years. So it would have taken at least 3 years for me to integrate. But in my case, I think it was closer to 9 months, I would say. So in other words, it happened more gracefully, more smoothly. Why? Because I was more deeply in touch with why I'm. It was not like a reaction. I knew why I was doing it, and I had a sense of surrender, and I had a sense of trust, and I wasn't beating myself up. In any case, in Buddhism, at least, there is no stigma around any of these things. There's no sense of shame around any of these things. It's seen more like an education. And in your education, you can sometimes change your subject. You can focus more on one thing, on the other thing. These are all opportunities. When you're working, having a family, that's one kind of opportunity. When you have gone into the forest and meditating, that's another kind of opportunity. Every opportunity comes with its own shadows, its own strengths, its own weaknesses. You just see it like that. It's an opportunity. See where you're being guided.
So let's talk about this concept of, which is it's big, but this, and you kind of have seeded this through the discussion, but recognizing our conscious connection to the divine, to God, being able to see, I think the phrase that you use is, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I have parents who have been quite intellectual, and they were never really interested in religion. Although my tradition is a Hindu tradition, Hinduism sees God in everything. So they see God in the sun, in the rock, in the tree, in the air, in the breeze, in the river, and everything is worshipped as God. Literally, every person, our greeting to each other is namaste. And namaste is like the highest in me, or the divinity in me recognizes the divinity in you. That's the greeting. That's a normal greeting in India, right? In Kashmir, they have a beautiful greeting. They say, Maujud Roz. Maujud Roz means be present. Be present. Be present to what? Be present to grace. Be present to beauty. Be present to depth. It's all here. Be present to power. Don't go looking for it in other places. So the elders will bless Maujud Roz. Be present. So I went from that into a Buddhist tradition. And Buddhism is one of the unique religions which doesn't talk about God. It doesn't say there is God. The Buddha says it's irrelevant. He said whether you believe in God or not, if you get angry, you're still going to burn. If you deceive someone, you're still going to be confused. You're going to still have that fear of being caught.
Natural laws.
So Buddha said, let's not get involved in metaphysical questions. He gives the example of someone has shot a poisonous arrow, and you've been struck by that poisonous arrow, and your friends and relatives gather, and they're trying to take out the arrow. You say, stop. First, tell me, the man who shot, was he tall or short? The man who shot the arrow, did he do it from a wooden bow or a metallic bow? Was the bowstring made of animal hide, or was it made of some kind of plant fiber? And people are saying, what are you talking about? I mean, you have this arrow stuck in your heart. We're trying to pull it out. He said, no, first answer those questions. So the Buddha says there are certain questions which are actually not relevant to the teaching. And he actually says this question of whether there is soul or not, whether there's God or not, it's irrelevant. It's a totally different approach he comes from. He says, fine, keep those questions aside. I'm not going to answer them. I'm not going to get entangled in them. I want you to realize just the structure of how your experience is unfolding. For example, in this moment, if I have resistance, if I have resistance to this experience, I will have a certain kind of experience. What Byron Katie calls, if I argue with reality, then I suffer. Mm-hmm. And if I welcome reality, I embrace reality, I'm one with reality, then there's no suffering. So the Buddha is guiding us on how to become lucid and fluid with life without having to add any layers of assumption and belief about anything at all. So I went through that training where I actually didn't fall on any preconceived idea. Just like in seeing, let there be seeing. In hearing, let there be hearing. In smelling, let there be smelling. In tasting, let there be tasting. In sensation, let there be sensation. In thought, let there be thought. Without adding to it should be, could be, would be. Taking out all the conceptualization. And that's the approach the Buddha offered. And so the integration of
deep allowing, just deep allowing and acceptance.
Exactly. So the way I've integrated this, for me, God, G-O-D, God, is the grand overall design. That's how I understand God.
Oh,
I don't see God as I don't see God as an entity that's sitting and controlling us like puppets. Because if that is the case, what's to say that he himself is not a puppet with another grander one above him? And you can go on like this to infinity. So grand overall design, there is a intelligence. Like when I plant a seed, there's an intelligence which makes that seed draw in certain nutrients to become a sapling, to become a tree, right? Right now, if I had breakfast, then my stomach is digesting. I'm not telling it what to do. It just knows what to do. So there's a grand overall design, and I want to come into alignment with that grand overall design. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways I do that is I say, what is not the grand overall design? Is there anything I'm seeing, anything I'm hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or experiencing in any way that is not the grand overall design? And I can't find anything. It's all that. It's all that. So this is a beautiful meditation. What is not God? Forget about what is God. What is not God? What is not God? You start finding, oh my goodness, it's all this. It's all this.
It's all there. The darkness, all
of it.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody today about the dark goddess, and that was a construct I couldn't have remotely conceptualized a few years ago, but I'm like, you know what? That's everything. And
in the Sufi tradition, the highest state, they call it dazzling darkness.
Really?
Darkness. In the Taoist tradition, darkness, everything emerges from darkness. I'd gone for a dark retreat. We were living in complete darkness for 9 days and nights. Complete darkness, not a single pinprick of light.
Oh my gosh, was that terrifying?
In my case, it wasn't, but I can imagine for some people it might be. I really enjoyed it. One of my teachers said that light is actually the exception in the universe, which is very fascinating. We think of, so it's nice to be challenged in these ways. And the word, it's just a word. Darkness is just a word. Light is just a word. Why are we so afraid of these words? Why are we so fond of one word over the other?
Right. We've just attached so much meaning to darkness being something evil and sinister. What are we so
afraid of? But Carl Jung has said that, the treasure you're seeking is in the cave you're afraid to enter. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. So my philosophy is I get really excited when I get afraid of something. I get really excited when I get anxious about something. And I want to chase that. I want to chase my fears and I want to love them to death. And that's the way I approach my life.
Well, that's a beautiful philosophy, chasing your fears and loving them to death. I have heard sort of the same thing about making friends with your fear and allowing it, because our natural instinct is to go into fight, flight, or freeze when we're confronted with something fearful, and we shut down physiologically or we speed up. And when we're talking about like oneness, because I have my own experience with this now that I'm just so excited about, I know it's more experience than trying to put it together through thought forms and language. But when we're talking about the dark being everything, the depth, the inception, the still point of creation, right? Like the void, even like before something gets created, it's all darkness, gestation. You could call it the valley even, or the underworld. But when you're talking about kind of like oneness on a practical level, because we talk a lot about that, thought leaders and teachers, we're just always talking about oneness and unity consciousness. How do you bring that into your teachings? How do you phrase that in a way that it can land in people that doesn't feel like going into utter void and losing your identity?
You will lose an identity, but you'll gain a bigger identity. So there will be an identity that is lost, which is inevitable, but not lost in a way that it's excluded. So it's like transcend and include, like Ken Wilber says. And so the way I approach this is a few analogies that are simple and helpful could be wave and ocean. That wave, each of us is like a wave. And like my wave is talking to your wave right now. However, there's also an intuition that if we go digging, if I talk about my deepest pains and shames and fears, and you do too, you'll find, hey, this is amazing. And also I talk about my greatest hopes and longings, and you do too. So, wow, this is amazing. I mean, there may be some specifics that are slightly different, but on a general level, we are wanting similar things. And this is not just true for you and me. I heard about in the Middle East, they were trying to get the Palestinians to talk to the Israelis. And there was such a lot of pain over there. There was such a lot of baggage over there. These people, the moment they came into the room, they began shouting and accusing and abusing each other because there's been so much violence over the years. And the facilitator got them to the point of, they talk about your deepest fears. And they both talked about the same thing. They talked about the fear that their children will enter a world filled with violence. And they found common ground. The common ground, even between these very different people, the common ground, they love their children. They don't want their children to go through this ever again. And that becomes the foundation which you build. You see, you can always find common ground with everybody if you look for it hard enough. So the common ground we all have is consciousness. The fact that we are conscious. That right now someone's hearing this, you're conscious. Doesn't matter what you believe. Doesn't matter what religion you're from. Doesn't matter what your upbringing is, what your race is, what your background is, what your skin color is. Does not matter. You are conscious. Otherwise, you would not even hear this. You would not even know this. There has to be consciousness. So this basic fact that there is consciousness. And this becomes and rudimentary, like even in the Indian tradition, even rocks and soil and trees and animals, they all have consciousness, but not in the same way necessarily as we experience consciousness, but still a rudimentary form of consciousness. So there's a beautiful teaching. God sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, stirs in the animal, and awakens in man.
I like that.
That's one way of looking at oneness. The most recent, because, once you dip into this, the oneness revealed itself in so many different ways. Yesterday I was doing yoga and I had the thought, like, my teacher is so flexible and I'm not. And I had the sense that some people are more physically flexible than others, but others are more emotionally flexible. And others are more mentally flexible, and others are more spiritually flexible. So you see, we're all flexible in different ways. And to say one way is better than the other, it's just a matter of preference or context. In what context? Someone's strong, someone's really strong physically, but someone's really strong emotionally. There are some people who have debilitating illness from the time they're born, but they show such strength of spirit. So I began to think about this, we all are gifted in our own ways. And the idea of evolution, that I will become better, I'll become better, I'll become better. Who's to say that as I'm evolving, becoming better in one field, I'm also neglecting other aspects of my life? Like Mahatma Gandhi, considered to be the father of India, father of the nation, loved by so many people, admired by him. By his own children, but not considered a very good father.
Yeah.
So in the process of becoming father of the nation, he ended up becoming not such a great actual father to his own children. So how can I say, oh, I'm evolving, but I may be neglecting something else? So the idea of, in that moment yesterday, I got the sense that this is also God at play. God creates this notion of, oh, I'm better at this, I'm better at that, I'm evolving, I'm becoming. It's all, again, to cover up the basic underlying unity. If you look at it carefully enough and long enough and hard and deeply enough, you find that actually it's all one. It's appearing different, but it's all actually one. All those waves are nothing but ocean.
That's so beautiful. And I think one of the things that I'm really coming into an awareness of is that it isn't what any given individual is producing. there's just this level of intactness in that oneness for each being. It's just that there's more scales over the eyes, or more veils that are sort of shrouding that awareness from that individual. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, it isn't the outward manifestations that make us more advanced or conscious, as much as it is going deeper and deeper within and accessing, I want to say soul. I know there's a lot of definitions for that, but do you know what I'm trying to say? It's the inner exploration. It's the and it's like merging your soul with your body so that you can truly be awake, alive, conscious. That's better than someone who's on the track to produce or even offer gifts to humanity. It's what we're vibing. It's what we're generating within our own being. I'm actually
even hesitating to say that, because that would again be superimposing my values. Because that what you said kind of is my value system, but I hesitate to do that because I think life is far more mysterious than that. And like for example, they found that in Tibet they have these yak. It's like kind of a buffalo, a special kind of buffalo. So these yak herders spend their whole day, herding the yak. They're going around, they're eating, or the sheep, and they're going around. And they have nothing much to do beyond that. They're sitting and looking at the sky. And they learn from their teachers, the sky is a great analogy or a great metaphor for our own mind. Because clouds come and go, birds come and go, smoke comes and goes. Sometimes a plane may come and go, but the sky is unaffected. So they taught them, while you're herding the yak, once in a while you look up at the sky. Or just sit for hours looking at the sky. So outwardly, they were doing something quite mundane. Nothing seem very spiritual about this. But some of these yak herders had some of the highest realizations. Because imagine looking at the sky for hours together.
Yeah.
And you realize that your being is like that. You see, right now, this conversation is like a cloud in the sky. People are hearing this. There's a cloud in the sky. It's come and then it's gone. And yet the sky remains unchanged. So I would say that if I have an affinity for taking that inner journey first, that's exactly right for me. But if I have an affinity to go out and create something, then I would even trust that. Sure. I would trust going out and creating it and doing whatever you need to do. And you're going to get the hard knocks of life. Sooner or later, you're going to get disappointments. And that's going to make you reflect and say, what just happened over there? I was so sincere, and yet I got betrayed. I gave it my best and didn't work out the way I expected. And you see, even in that, your growth is going to happen. Whether you call it inner or outer doesn't really matter. That's really true.
Yeah. And it kind of, as I'm saying, it kind of reminds me of just that, the age-old masculine feminine dynamic of, outward masculine, more action-oriented, more maybe producing, if you will. And then the feminine of just receiving and contemplating and noticing, like the sky. I mean, that would bore me to tears. I'm not built that way. I'm glad I wasn't born herding yaks somewhere in. I say that with respect. I just, it's something in me has to teach. And I, even as I'm telling you, it's, the most optimal thing is just, have a really high frequency and love everyone and, master your inner terrain or what have you. But then as I'm saying it, I'm also like, but that'd get a little bit boring for me. I feel like I have to do something with that.
Yeah. Very nice. And just trust your process. Trust each one of us. This whole thing of superimposing other people's values on like my parents' values and at school, the school teaches me, and what popular culture teaches me, and television teaches me, and the so-called affiliation I have with whatever political idea. All of these, taking all this on, at some point, you're going to get choked. And you have to say, okay, there's a beautiful phrase in India, neti, not this. This shedding has to happen. This autumn has to come the season of autumn has to come. You just shed everything. You become bare. Not this. Shed. And only then can the new foliage emerge from that place. And to shed completely means to really question everything that I've ever been told. Question everything. There's a beautiful teaching in Zen. They say, great faith, great doubt, great awakening. That's the process. So we begin with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of faith. We're told to be a good boy, good girl, and we do it. We're told to follow all the rules, we do it. And at a certain point, we start saying, but wait a minute, even the people who told me to follow, they don't seem to be too happy. They seem to be messed up themselves. And what have I got from following all of these rules? I've actually become more convoluted. I've suppressed my intuition. I've taken entire chunks of myself and I made it evil and bad and I put it into a closet. And so you start questioning all of that. Everything you've been told, so great doubt. And it's important to go, this is the dark night of the soul. You doubt every single thing. But that's needed, that you need to doubt everything to now come to this new childlike innocence, which is not gullible, by the way. It's innocent, but not gullible. This innocence is actually quantum times faster than any cunningness in the world. This is so clean and so sharp and so fast and so appropriate and so accurate in everything that comes up in life. And this is great awakening. In great awakening, it's not you living life, which is just an idea. It's life. Life is just life. That's oneness right there. It's all life. We're all breathing the same air, drinking the same water, and assuming, oh, now this has become me. Eating the same food, oh, now this has become me. If you look at it carefully enough, there is no boundary. There is no boundary. These boundaries are all concepts.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a friend today and we were talking about how, there's that fine line between giving and receiving, honestly. And, and we're both mothers, so there's that. But maintaining the dignity was the word we came up with. Dignity in the chaos, keeping your dignity intact. When, you're being pulled so many different directions and there's so many ideologies and there's so much to experience. And for me, it's like, how do I stay aligned in what I truly value, which is soul sovereignty, and not feel like there's a total dissolution of what I've created to this point and merging into oneness. And so that dignity, for whatever reason, the dignity came in with the sovereignty when we were kind of parsing this out for ourselves and talking about how we experience God and what that means to us. And it came down to that word for whatever reason.
That's really powerful what you say. And this is in the Kashmir tradition. We have something called Kashmir Shaivism, and it talks about Shiva and Shakti and Nara. Shiva is consciousness. Shakti is what is experienced in consciousness, so the whole world, the whole manifest world. And Nara is the individual. So there is father, mother, and child. So father is that which knows. Mother is all the knowing, all the experiences. You talked about experiences. And here's me, I'm the divine child, which is a combination of both. I'm a combination of knowing and knowledge and experiences. And all three are valid. And like you said, dignity. There's a dignity in my being confused as well. Because you see, my confusion, no one else in the universe has experienced confusion exactly the way I have.
Yeah.
My sadness, no one else in the universe has experienced sadness exactly the way I have. Longing, no one else in the universe has experienced longing exactly the way I have. So when I say depressed, you say, oh, I know depression. No, you don't know depression. You don't know my depression. You don't know my longing. You don't know my ache. You don't know. It's a whole different animal, you see? So there's a certain dignity in my joy, in my everything. And so we don't just completely say, oh, this is all one. No, there's a certain beauty in that. And there's a grace in that. And in accepting the beauty and grace and brokenness and everythingness of this embodied experience that is as valid as recognizing the grace and the beauty of the Godhead.
I love that trinity of Father, Mother, Divine Child, and how we are each embodying that in such very, very diverse ways, which makes this all this huge, big symphony of the cacophony of life, really. Mm-hmm. I think I was just so programmed, as I'm sure almost all of the listeners, with this idea that, and when we talk about things like ascension and, an enlightened spiritual path, that at some point you leave behind certain characters, or I don't know. It's not it. To me, it feels like that oneness is more inclusive. It feels like when I think about Christ consciousness, or think about Jesus and the stories of Jesus, just going to the lepers, or, hanging out with the publicans and sinners, and not sitting in a church. It's so apparent to me now that the separatist way of removing yourself from, quote unquote, the world, the evil, dark, scary world. Now, I'm not advocating to jump into illicit behaviors. That's not what I'm saying. But being able to relate to that in a way where you don't feel like you're better than that. You're not stooping a grade below into this holier than thou mentality. But you can see, kind of going back to how we started this discussion of just being able to look with open-mindedness and to be, you said, be deeply impacted by the individual, no matter what path they're choosing, because everyone's on a spiritual path, even though it doesn't look that way from the outset.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, how can we tie this up? Because
I think, what's coming to me listening to you is sometimes even words become a barrier. So I like to actually use these days very simple words. I don't really use words like oneness and enlightenment. I keep it really simple. I talk about things like connection. You kind of have a sense of the word connection, so what's it like to connect with myself? So for me to connect with myself would be something as simple as putting my hand on my heart. I feel slightly more connected to myself, and maybe being aware of my breath. I feel slightly more connected to myself, and just allowing myself to be, instead of always become something or the other. So what's it like to connect to myself, to just embrace my emotions the way they are, to embrace this reality the way it is? And what's it like to connect to you, to really pay attention, to notice what's it like for you right now, and to check my assumptions, and to reveal my experience as I'm with you. Mm-hmm. And so to connect to you, and to connect to this togetherness, that as we are spending time, a certain togetherness is getting enriched and enhanced and coming alive, So what's it like to connect to me and to you and to life? And where's the aliveness? That's another good question. What's making me more alive? Maybe reading a certain book, maybe hanging out with a certain friend, maybe certain activities, maybe dropping certain activities. And what makes me come alive? So I think to keep it simple and say, what makes me feel connected? What makes me come alive? This is as valid as any other spiritual path, because you're prioritizing connection, aliveness, is going to bring you to that same place of oneness and ascension, or whatever else you want to call it. And you have to just see what words work better for you. Because sometimes it gets very confusing. When I began teaching, I found the word acceptance was very difficult for people. How can I just accept? There's so much going on. I can't just accept it. This acceptance is the wrong teaching. Yeah. And I changed the word. I used the word include. And somehow that was easier for people, the word include. Because include means it's in your experience. Instead of cutting it out of your experience, it's included. Acceptance seems to imply I'll put up with it. No, there's no putting up with it. You include it, and now that's actually given you a more comprehensive sense of what's really going on, and now you respond with open eyes. You see, so you include. Nice. You include.
Yeah,
like that.
I like that. Connection, aliveness, inclusion. Those are all very feminine to me. Wow, this has been so beautiful. Is there anything else that, because we've touched on, let's circle back actually to the conscious community, because given all of these, these arena, these kind of like subset things we've kind of touched on, I want to hear your vision. I know that you've had this since you were a child, but is it kind of formed?
Yeah, so I've really got a sense, in between, I thought I have to create this, and this was like my duty to do in this lifetime. And it was quite heavy actually. And I always felt the sense of, am I ready for it? Am I capable enough? Because you see, there are so many, I've been in the spiritual circuit for so long, and so many people start off with good intention and get derailed one way or the other, and they get lost because there are so many pitfalls. However, the way it shifted for me was recognizing it's already created. I got a sense it's already created. It's already done, and it's magnetizing me. So not that I have to create something. For me, the shift has happened. it's done. This is inevitable. It's done. Not only for me, this is the destiny of humanity, that we are moving from individualized consciousness to a collective consciousness. And there are also consciousness beyond that. But this is, so it came to me that this is done. It's a done deal. And I just need to allow myself to be magnetized. And I just need to follow, like I said, my connection and my aliveness. What makes me feel more connected? What makes me feel more alive? What makes me feel enlivened? What makes me, also fun and play is another good one. So that is what gave me the strength to then announce it. It was my birthday, 14 February. And I announced that, hey guys, this is a vision that's been alive in me for years. And I've sometimes taken steps forward, but also taken steps back because I felt I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. But I just want to put it out there. I don't know what's going to happen. And very quickly, over 250 people just signed up. And now we meet twice a week. We talk and we just are getting to know each other. We're talking about, like I said, tell a vision. We're talking about our deepest longings. We're getting to know each other. We're sharing our gifts. And we're developing some basic skills like how do we relate more authentically? How can we learn to even share our disagreements in a way that doesn't disconnect us? And so we're learning some basic skill. Like this is the software of a community. There's the hardware of a community, which is, okay, how do we actually get together? How do we live together? How do we create together? How do we survive together? And how do we thrive together? That's the mechanics of it. But the software is how do we relate to one another? And how do we share what's in us? And how do we support each other, even in the initial phases of community formation? So I'm feeling very guided with this. And I'm feeling, there's a lot of, it's spontaneously coming together.
Yeah.
And so I feel I'm on track. I just have to keep aligning myself again and again, get out of doership, get out of the sense that I'm the decider, I'm the controller, and just allow this current to take me to where it's going. The ocean of inevitability, which is the larger consciousness we're all meant to inhabit. That's where I am with this.
That's so awesome. I heard recently that most people, especially this up and coming generation, the new millennials or the old millennials, I guess. What are the ones after the millennials generation?
I don't know.
But they're so savvy with not attaching to a guru or, the group think. And it's just, they're very sensitive to being controlled and not having tolerance as a marker of the community. And so I love what you're saying. And I think there will be some brilliant innovators who will figure this out for all of us on larger scales, right? So that we can come into, in my religious heritage, it's called Zion, which is this, and I know it's called that in different other religions too, but it's just this whole, living together, not having a stratified society. Well, there's egalitarian leadership between males and females, and everybody's sort of, nobody has more than another. Everybody's trading and sharing and in this love consciousness. That's, the healthy.
Sounds like the feeling you get in Zion National Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically awe. The word is awe. In Zion National Park, your mouth just hangs open. You don't even realize it hangs open.
It's so beautiful, really? Isn't it?
Can there be a place like this? So it's like that sense of awe, which I think is even beyond gratitude, is to live in awe. And one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, she says, wouldn't God be so disappointed if he were not dazzled at least 10 times each day? Like God has made this amazing creation and all we do is fault find and trouble and fight with each other. But wouldn't God be so disappointed if you're not dazzled and in awe at least 10 times every day? So that's the community. Awesome. That's the consciousness of the community.
Yeah. And I think every person can dazzle when we get to the heart of things for them, and just putting each person in the limelight, no matter where they've been and what they've done. I just want to say this one thing for whatever reason that's coming to my mind. I remember I was sitting in church in Idaho. This would have been, oh my goodness, probably about 12 years ago or something like that. And, it's just the same old songs and whatever. And there's a level of peace there and it's what it is. And, just going Sunday after Sunday, same thing, same structure. But it happened to be like the first Sunday of the month, which is a fast and testimony meeting is what they call it. So you come in having, skipped 2 meals to come in a fasting state, and then people get up and share their beliefs at the pulpit. Well, this man, I think we were like 3/4 of the way through the meeting, and usually you're supposed to like walk to the, like make the long walk to the front when you're moved upon to do so. But this gentleman stood up from the back and just blurted out, "Hey, everyone, my name is so-and-so. I'm here. I'm working through my addiction. I'm just taking one day at a time. I just want y'all to know I feel really peaceful here." I mean, it was just so, and he was in a t-shirt and jeans, looked like he hadn't shaved for a while. And I was just so struck by that, how he just broke up the tradition and the trajectory and the mundane and just came from his heart and just stood up. And I thought that took so much courage, and it was so inspiring. And I just did a little mental note to myself. It's like, what if we had characters like this from all over we just swung the doors wide open and people could just come in and share like that. That's my vision.
So good. So good.
Yeah. Well, Nithya, this has been a joy. And as always, you inspire and you just you activate in me some wisdom teachings that seem super familiar, but I've never put words to. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sherry. It's been a joy. Yeah.
How can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram. These days I'm posting on Instagram. Look for Nithya Shanti. I spell Nithya with an H, NITHYASHANTI. And there are a few other places. But I think Instagram is a good place. Let's keep it simple.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And, I'm sure you and I will stay in touch. And I feel some collaboration in the future with this whole community idea. I don't know. It's still forming for me. But the idea of having global outreach and connections with people who are of like mind is really a beautiful concept to explore. And so we'll see where that leads.
That's lovely. Can I share one last thing?
Please.
So, like I said earlier, we have this greeting in India, Namaste. And Namaste means the highest in me bows to the highest in you. The divinity in me, the beauty in me, bows to the divinity and the beauty in you. So one of my teachers, Byron Katie, American, some of you might have heard of her, she had a spontaneous awakening after years of depression, where she just realized that actually it was not her life that was troubling her, it was her thoughts about her life. And that recognition just completely cut through a lot of her patterns that were just causing such a lot of affliction. So basically, it took her about a year to ground that. And that's why she calls her process the work, where she basically questioned her own thinking. Is it true? What I'm thinking, is it true? Am I sure it's true? What happens when I believe this thought? Who am I without this thought? It was just an internal spring cleaning. And people began getting very attracted to her. So she lived in a small town in California. And people would come to her door and they'd ring the bell and she'd open the door and they would say namaste. Because a lot of people in the spiritual circuit say namaste. And she'd never heard the word namaste because she had no background in spirituality. So to her ears, they were saying, no mistake, no mistake. She says, no mistake. How wise? Come on in. And everybody would say namaste. She's like, no mistake. And I love the fact that she heard namaste as no mistake, no mistake, no mistake. She said, why are you even bothering to come to me? You've already got the essence. No mistake, no mistake. So that's what I would like to end with, saying there is no mistake where you are in life, what's happened to you so far. Even though right now it seems to be arbitrary or meaningless, there will come a point where you will see all of it from a place of symmetry. And everything will be seen. Every atom, every cell, every experience of life has been exactly in the right place. And that's the moment of awe. And that's the moment of bliss. And that's the moment of deep trust. So I summarize everything that I share in 3 words. Trust your process.
Ooh.
Trust your process.
Trust your process. That's glorious. Thank you, Nithya.
Beautiful. Sherry, thank you so much.
Yeah, I told you guys there would be a lot to this episode. One of my favorite things that Nithya brought up was allowing yourself to be deeply impacted by others. and trusting their process, trusting your process of this whole complete mystery that we're living out. Like nobody has all the answers. His acronym for God, I felt like was so powerful: grand overall design. Just this beautiful intelligence that lives in each of us that helps us, just come into alignment with who we are at the basic core level, because we all have God within. So yeah, I'm just grateful that I get to live in a very imperfect world, a messy, chaotic world, and practice alignment. And I never would have said that I was grateful for that before, because my personality is such that I would just like everything to line up, and then I can immerse myself and come into a way of being that feels peaceful. Like I had this belief that things needed to line up on my exterior environment for me to feel peaceful inside. But I'm just learning now just how we shall embrace everything as beautiful and literally wonderful. And that the real practice is finding that inner alignment, irrespective of what's going on the outside. So be in the questioning this week and allow yourself that curiosity and that healthy inquiry, not having to have everything all wrapped up, but just allowing yourself to just be and revel in the not knowing. So powerful to come to that place where you just sort of surrender, not having to have all the answers, and you just live your life. At least that's the life goal that I'm shooting for. And just so you guys know, you can follow Nithya on @Nithya Shanti on Instagram, and you can follow me at Cherie.Burton on Instagram. I actually just started a brand new Instagram account, Cherie Soul Essentials. And Soul Essentials is an all-encompassing term for what I share about health. So a lot of stuff about essential oils and yoga and just natural remedies, beauty secrets, etc. Lots of stuff about, mind-body healing. So go check that out. I'm going to be doing a giveaway next week. Thank you so much for listening once again to my ultra-long episodes. I know some of you are just loving the deep dives, and I'm going to keep bringing it because there's so much more to explore in this very beautiful, messy, chaotic, lovely world. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.